Hi, I'm your host, Marsha Florence for Just Ask. Today's show, ladies and gentlemen, is Crisis Intervention Team Michigan. Hurry back and join us. Hi, I'm your host, Marsha Florence for Just Ask. Today's show, ladies and gentlemen, is Crisis Intervention Team Michigan, and we have the executive president himself of Crisis Intervention Team Michigan and NAMI, Kevin Fischer. Good afternoon, Kevin Fischer.
Good afternoon. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Did I get that all right, Kevin? Because you got two titles going on now, so I wanted to make sure that our viewers know that.
You did good.
Okay.
You did good. You got it right.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure.
Okay. So, Kevin, you know what? We have to go back a little bit because people, when they used to see you, they say, oh, that's the gentleman from NAMI. Okay, so I want you to fill us in on the two roles you have now and what's been going on.
So in addition to the role as NAMI Michigan Executive Director, which I still have, I am also now the Executive Director for CITI International Michigan, which stands for Crisis Intervention Team Training International, a program NAMI helped establish back in 1988. And CIT is all about making sure we have a humane, compassionate response to people who are experiencing behavioral health crisis.
Okay. Now let's go back a little bit. So NAMI, because those who don't understand that acronym, what is NAMI?
NAMI is the National Alliance on Mental Illness. We are the nation's largest grassroots mental health organization that's purely dedicated to advocacy to improve the quality of life for anyone affected by mental illness. Not only a person who lives with a diagnosis, but for their family members and literally the community at large.
Okay. So now you guys have combined the two.
Yes, we've done that here in Michigan, and it's really not as complicated as it sounds because of our historical relationship with CIT, and we're both advocacy organizations. It's really, in a lot of ways, very seamless for me to be able to run both organizations. I will have two separate teams, so I'll have two separate staffs, one that's focused primarily on making sure we have effective crisis intervention team training programs across the state of Michigan, and then I'll still keep my traditional role as the executive director for NAMI Michigan.
Okay, that's a lot.
It is.
But you're the man for it, Kevin. You're the man for it. I can see that now. Okay, so you know what? Now, give me some clarity or give our viewers some clarity on the crisis intervention team. What will that team be doing?
So crisis intervention teams are what we refer to as a community program. It is primarily made up of first responders, which typically tend to be law enforcement, but it can be EMS workers, firefighters, even security at casinos, anyone who comes in contact with the public and in a way that the public might experience a behavioral health crisis. And how do we de-escalate those situations? How do we get people to help rather than hurting them or taking them to jail? How do we get them real help? And so it's first responders, it's behavioral health care professionals, it's behavioral health care advocates all coming together to make sure we provide the most humane, compassionate, professional response to people who are in crisis, which at the end of the day benefits the entire community.
You know, this has been a long time coming.
It has. Again, CIT has been around since 1988, but for me here in Michigan, I have been pursuing getting this office established for almost 5 years. And it's something that I'm very passionate about, of course, because of my personal history. My son lived with very serious mental illness, unfortunately had some interaction with the law enforcement that did not go very well, quite frankly. Subsequently, unfortunately, I lost my son to suicide in 2010. So I am very passionate about making sure we take care of our most vulnerable citizens.
Most definitely, most definitely. And you know, and just knowing how you feel about your own situation allows other people who are going through this to know that you understand. You understand the cry for help, and so why not have law enforcement, EMTs on them trying to come together and be trained to be better effective for our mental illness.
Yeah, we have to do a better job, first, of understanding what crisis response is and what it is not. And one of the things that I really want the community to understand is most often law enforcement does not get a lot of de-escalation training when they come through the academy. Their culture is very different. So the origin for CIT was to give them that additional training. And our program, CIT International, or what we refer to as the Memphis model, is considered the gold standard across the country. We've been around for 40 years, and we train officers, again, how to verbally de-escalate people who are in crisis and how to get them to help without harming them.
So why do we call it the Memphis model?
So we call it the Memphis model because it originated in Memphis.
Okay.
In 1987, a man who was experiencing behavioral health crisis unfortunately was shot and killed by Memphis police. The local NAMI affiliate went to city leadership, the chief of police and the mayor, and said, you have to do better. You can't kill people because you don't know how to respond to them. So that was the origin of NAMI, the city of Memphis police, and the University of Memphis created the original curriculum for CIT. And we call it the Memphis model because it is a full 40-hour model that no one else is doing. And that 40-hour model includes de-escalation training. It helps law enforcement officers understand what resources are available so you don't take somebody to jail. We help them understand how to de-escalate situations, understanding that time is on their side. You don't have to rush through. So it's really important. It's a full 40-hour that we cannot shortcut.
Okay. Okay, well said. I mean, when you look at it and you say the Memphis model, that tells a story that different states go through different things, but the outcome's the same. Somebody died because they were having a crisis and they were misunderstood, maybe misdiagnosed, medication overload, anything, but the people who are supposed to help somehow it turned out, tragic.
Yeah.
So that's what makes it hard. How many states are in practice now of this type of service?
So to my knowledge, every state and even other countries utilize the CIT International model. So for example, we just had the annual conference and we had almost 2,000 participants. Half of them law enforcement, half of them behavioral health care and advocates. And I think we had representation from 7 different countries, including the Ukraine, Spain, Guam. And so it's an international model and it's been accepted as the gold standard globally.
That's good. That's good. We're going to take a break. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back with some very, very good information from Kevin Fischer. So you know what? I want you to get your pen and paper out because you have some questions and I know that we want to get them over to Kevin. So we'll be right back.
If you store your guns properly,
I'll feel safer when I'm playing outside.
Safer when walking home.
And I won't have to tell my kids, this isn't a drill.
Never let your gun get into the wrong hands. Always lock it up.
And welcome back to the show. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you're just not tuning in, what I always say, get your pen and paper out. Why? Because you got questions. So when you have questions, if you send us the questions at the bottom of the screen, you see the justasktalkshow.org website, or if you want to email me directly, Marcia at Just Ask Talk Show, feel free, and I will get those questions over to Mr. Kevin Fischer. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is a very touching subject that we're going over here because a lot of us do have family members that are suffering from mental illness of some sort, be it medication, be it drugs, be it just anything, being shut in from COVID and all that. You need to take this seriously and try to reach out to get support for your loved one as well as yourself. So, Kevin, I wanted to say that to our viewers because a lot of people always say, there's nothing wrong with me. It's not just you. It could be anyone in the family, whether it's a child or if it's an older adult or if it's the neighbor next door. You know, you still want to have some type of knowledge or resource of what it is that, you know, we're confronting right now in these days.
Well, and it's really important to understand, you know, we sometimes in the community say, if you see something, say something. Well, this goes beyond that and say, if you see something, if you have a loved one who's experiencing a mental health crisis or a substance use crisis, you want to know how to best help them in the safest, least restrictive environment possible. So you need to know that a program like Crisis Intervention Team is available. You need to know when to call and ask for it. But equally as important, we need to understand how to prevent crisis from the beginning. And so that's why I say not only see something, say something, but do something.
Oh, yeah.
Don't wait until a person becomes a danger to themselves or others, where now you're forced to call the police and you increase the risk that somebody can get hurt.
True. So why is it important that every community have an effective crisis response program?
Because at the end of the day, the benefit is to the entire community. It reduces the chances of our loved one who's in crisis being harmed. It reduces the chance of law enforcement being harmed. It reduces costs. One of the most expensive ways to deal with a person who has a mental illness is for them to be incarcerated or hospitalized. If we can get in front of that and reduce crisis, or if law enforcement knows how to verbally de-escalate and knows I can take a person to a crisis urgent care instead of taking them to the hospital or instead of taking them to jail, it benefits everybody. So that's the benefit, and that's why we say our CIT model is a community program. It's not just a law enforcement training program. This is a benefit to the entire community.
So what does the community need to understand about crisis response program?
We need to understand what it is and what it is not. And I want to be really clear, and this is a tough conversation to have. Having a crisis response program is not a magic wand. There's no absolutes in this world. There are, unfortunately, some situations that cannot be verbally de-escalated for a number of reasons. However, we find that the largest percentage can be if officers are properly trained, if they're aware of the resources, if they understand we can slow a situation down and get a person to a place mentally, physically where we can help them, it just benefits everybody and it increases the chances that everybody gets to go home safely. But we have to understand the reality. We have to understand, when do I call 911 or when do I call 988? Because for example, if a person is not a imminent threat to themselves, they're not a danger to hurting themselves or somebody else, then you don't need to call law enforcement. You can call 988. They can dispatch what we call a mobile crisis team or a co-responder team. So law enforcement doesn't play such a big role. We don't want law enforcement on scene unless they absolutely have to be there. And that's the key that the public needs to understand.
That's good. That's good. So I know we have a few of you symbols and things here. So the Crisis Intervention Team International Michigan. Okay, that's a beautiful symbol there.
This is our new logo. I don't even have it on my stationery or anything yet, so it's hot off the press. I'm really proud of it because Michigan is the first state that's been allowed to use the Crisis Intervention Team International title. Other states will say we have crisis intervention team, but they have not to this point been allowed to say international. We're the first ones to have that designation. And so I'm really proud of that. And this allows us to go across the state of Michigan. So many communities already have a crisis intervention team program, but for those communities who don't, maybe rural communities, maybe small communities where they have very small departments, we want to make sure every community has access to this. So that's what's so special about this office.
That's great. That's great. Okay. So I was glad we had a photo of the class. So this is the classroom setting.
So, and it's really interesting because we never have classes of more than 24 people because it is a very intimate, it is a very hands-on training. Again, the people in the room, these are all law enforcement officers, behavioral health professionals or advocates like myself. Part of that 40-hour training, about half of it, is hands-on role plays. So we keep the class sizes small because we want to put those first responders through as realistic a process as we possibly can, because if we can get it right in the classroom, it increases the chances of getting it right on the street.
Okay, that's great. That's great. Now I know you guys had the conference here in 2023, and that's what we've been talking about earlier. So now, are we looking for future conferences to include a larger audience of participation and
Absolutely. The CIT conference grows every year. I was really proud to bring it to Michigan last year. We had 1,800 or so people here in Michigan. This past August, we were in Indianapolis. We had 2,000 people there. Next year, we are in Anaheim, California, where we're expecting 2,500 to 3,000 people to participate. So it's really good to see that this is growing. More communities are getting involved.
But Michigan was the beginning of it.
No, Michigan wasn't the first. This was the
Okay.
first time we had it in Michigan.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we've been having conferences for years.
Okay.
But again, it was a 3 or 4 year process to bring it here to Michigan, because it made Michigan the center of the crisis response world.
All right. Put Michigan on the map there. Now, I know this picture has got to be everybody on the team here.
So this is my board. This picture was taken at the conference here in Detroit last year. At that time, I was the president of CIT International. I'm now what we call the immediate past president, but I'm still a board member. And I'm really proud of this group, because this group represents people from all across the country. There are, I think, 2 of us maybe from the same state, but everybody else is from across the country, because this is a national or international program.
Great. And do you and this gentleman here?
So this is my good friend, Chief Jim Nettle of Plymouth Township Police Chief. And this was a very recent picture. We took this about a week and a half ago. And it shows the partnership between advocacy, law enforcement. This was at an event called Faith in Blue. We held this at a place of worship. And this again demonstrates that Crisis Intervention Team International is a community program. It's not just a law enforcement program.
Great. Well, Kevin, like I said, you're doing such a wonderful job within the community, especially educating us here today at the Just Dance Talk Show, so that our viewers will have a better understanding and clarity of what the crisis intervention program is about, because people are still wondering around, like, what's going to happen next, or how am I going to protect my loved one from getting hurt by law enforcement? Yep. So I tell you what, we're going to take a break, and we're going to come back with some more good information about Crisis Intervention Team Michigan. All right.
Hello, I'm Wayne County Sheriff Benny Napoleon from Wayne County, Michigan. I have seen the crisis in mental health evolve over the course of my over 44-year career in law enforcement. It's always been an issue with people who require treatment, but the real issue is that we have seen services cut back consistently, so we're seeing more and more people. As a person who runs 3 jails now, we have an overwhelming and disproportionate number of people who are incarcerated in our jails who require treatment at some level, slight to severe. And the real issue is having the available resources to treat them properly. The jail is not a proper place to treat a person who requires treatment. We need to understand that it costs more to incarcerate a person who needs treatment than it does to get them into the appropriate treatment facility, as opposed to having them incarcerated in a jail. I believe that CIT could be the national and should be the national standard if, in fact, we can get the powers that be to buy into the concept and understand and appreciate the value. Having gone through it and having witnessed it firsthand, I believe that this is a major step in the right direction, assuming that we can get folks who are making the decisions on funding to really embrace CIT and allow it to do what it is designed and developed to do. And I think you will see a substantial improvement in the way that people who require treatment are progressing and how they're stabilized.
And welcome back to the show. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I want to note that you just saw this wonderful, beautiful PSA with the late Benny Napoleon. So I wanted to ask you about that because I know that you and him were good friends and everything, and he seemed like he had a message in that segment. So tell us about that.
Yeah, and first of all, I want to thank our friends at Detroit Wayne Integrated Health Network for that video. That was shot about a year or so before we lost Benny, and I'm going to refer to him as the late, great Benny Napoleon because I have so much admiration for our former Wayne County Sheriff. Benny got it, and I couldn't say it any better or more eloquently than he said it in that video. Benny understands the community portion of crisis intervention team training and the value that it brings to the community. And so a large part of the effort, my effort the last 4 years to make this office a reality, is really been done with Benny in mind.
Okay. Well, it was well said, and we thank you guys for that, and definitely we can't wait to get more resources out about crisis intervention. So now, how do we prevent crisis? I mean, is there something? It's not a magic wand, but how do we incorporate trying to keep the family safe or educate our families first before we have to get to this part?
So it goes back to my saying about see something, do something. When my son, before I lost him, Dominique lived with bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. And there were days when he got out of bed in the morning, I could see him doing what we call decompensating. I could see him going down a bad road. I noticed that he wasn't taking his medication. I was recognizing that he wasn't himself. He was becoming more aggressive and those kinds of things. Family members, when you see that in your loved ones, act then. Don't wait until, again, they're a danger to themselves or others. Don't wait until you're afraid. One of the things that just punches me in the gut all the time is, unfortunately, when a person is in crisis, law enforcement or somebody gets involved and somebody gets hurt. And the community says, well, don't trust law enforcement. Don't call law enforcement. And I want to be careful here because I don't want to indict a family, but I do want us to say, do everything in your power to prevent it from getting to that point. And so sometimes I had to take my son to a crisis center because at that time, and this was before I became an advocate, my fear was I don't want to call the police. I don't want him, I don't want to risk him getting hurt. So it was hard as a parent to take him someplace that he didn't want to go. But I did it out of love, and I did it trying to keep him safe. So we have these crisis urgent cares. Detroit Wayne just opened a place earlier this year called the 707 Crisis Center, which is at 707 Milwaukee Street in Detroit. We have a place called COPE in Livonia. There are a number of crisis centers where you can take your loved one there. You don't have to have a police escort. You don't have to have a prescription or referral. 24/7, you can take them there and say, I'm concerned about my loved one. I need to have them evaluated to keep them safe.
So let's go here, Kevin. Would it be to a family member's advantage for them to go first and see firsthand what is being, what's available, what resources are there? Because some people, if you can say, okay, well, take your loved one when they're ill, but how about we go before something happens? Even if I just want to stop by myself and get firsthand knowledge, then I know if this is the place I want to, take my loved one to, or what would be the standard procedure when we come there.
So what I recommend first, we live in this world now where everything's available on the internet. Google it first. And my caution here is that sometimes it might not be appropriate for you to say, hey, I want to go on a tour of the crisis center because these are working facilities and we have to mind the privacy of the individuals who are there, or maybe they're very busy at the time. They can't take you on a tour. Now, sometimes they do, because part of the crisis intervention team training is we do site visits. We take officers to treatment facilities. We take them to clubhouses. We take them to places so they can understand exactly what you're asking. What does this look like? What's my loved one going to experience? So I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying Google first, call first. Don't just show up and say, I want to do a tour.
Well, I just know there are some people, especially if you're older adults, you're not always computer savvy, but you have options.
Yeah.
Now, I know somebody wants to get in contact with you. Is there an email or what are we using?
Yes, and so the CIT Michigan website is not up yet, so I'm using my NAMI contact information. So if you need to contact me, if you have questions, you can reach me at kfischer, which is KFISCHER, at NAMIMI.org, or you can call my office at 517-485-4049.
Okay, we're going to post that up again so people will get a chance to see that, because I can tell you there's going to be some phone calls, okay? And I know how you are. You will take those phone calls gracefully and answer the questions with all.
I welcome the calls. The whole reason I thank you for this opportunity, because I want the public to be informed. I want them to understand it. I want them to utilize.
Great, great. But I'm telling you something, we're at a pivotal point in life where we have more tools available to us way back before, the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. So, now it is time to use them and don't be afraid to use them. A lot of parents don't want to say that their children are experiencing some type of mental illness, breakdown, meltdown, whatever you want to call it, but yet you can't keep a grown person at home. This is my question. A child who's not really a child because they're over 21, does the parent still have the right of way to admit that young person, or it has to be on their own?
So we need to do a different show on this. But there's a process in Michigan called assisted outpatient treatment, or AOT, and you can Google that. And that is a process by anyone. Doesn't have to even be a family member. You could be a neighbor and say, I'm really concerned about my loved one. And you can go to probate court. It is not criminal court. You can go to probate court and petition someone you're concerned about under the assisted outpatient treatment law. That person will be evaluated. We do everything we can to protect their rights, but that person will be evaluated, and if it is determined that they need behavioral health care help, that help can be provided to them through the probate court at no cost to them. And at the end of the day, keeps them safe, keeps the community safe, saves us money. It is a win-win-win down the road. So great question. And to your point, we need to know more about the resources we have available.
Yes, we do. And that's why a lot of people are going to be calling you, okay, and emailing you. Okay, so, Kevin, I always get a delight when you come. Will you come back again?
Anytime.
Okay, now I'm going to hold you to it.
Anytime.
All right. Now, ladies and gentlemen, really, this was one of those conversations with Kevin Fischer that we had to have with you so that you'll know what's out there available for you in the community. He's offered his phone number, his email, so by all means, at the bottom of the screen where you see it, definitely reach out and contact him and tell him you got a question, all right? Or you can always reach us here at justastalkshow.org, Marcia at Just As Talk Show, 1-800-323-5336. I'm your host, Marcia Florence of Just Ask. What do I always say? If you have a question about a person with a disability or just a general question, don't be afraid to ask. Just ask. I'm your host. Thank you.